Welcome to a special edition of Suncoast FYI. I'm Nancy O'Neill. Joining me today are two distinguished gentlemen, Chicago native and Sarasota resident David Houle, who is an author, a futurist, former network television executive, and currently futurist in residence at Ringling College of Art and Design. To my left is SNN News Director Craig Burdick, who I asked to join us today. Craig has been at SNN since October of 2005. In April, he celebrated 50 years in TV and radio and 70 years on this earth. Welcome to you both. In the first part of our discussion with futurist David Houle, we'll be discussing what exactly makes a futurist and what the landscape for the movement looks like here on the Suncoast. David, it's great to have you here, finally, and I think our viewers would like to know what a futurist is.
Well, different futurists answered the question differently. I regard being a futurist as being a catalyst to get people, markets, companies, the world to think about the future and then to facilitate a conversation about it.
Okay.
I have found that people really don't think about the future.
Now, and just to kind of spin off on that a little bit, how do you view yourself differently from, say, a Renaissance man or a visionary? I mean, what puts you in the futuristic category, so to speak?
People have called me a visionary just because I have these visions about the future. And it's funny you say Renaissance man, because in this third book in this series, we do a whole chapter on the Renaissance man, which is Leonardo da Vinci.
Yes.
So I admire him greatly. Basically, a futurist, I professionally try to see what's going to happen. Not so much what I want to happen, but what I think is going to happen. And that serves a great function. I grew up in my 20s. I read all the great futurists of the last 75 years. Dr. Alvin Toffler, R. Buckminster Fuller, and Marshall McLuhan are the three, and Andy Warhol to some degree, because we live in his world. And so I grew up at an early age. I kept thinking, okay, so this is a really good gift if somebody has it.
Yes.
And then in my professional life, I always did things that people said wouldn't work. All my life people said, oh, you live ahead of the curve.
Exactly.
So living my whole life is, all of a sudden I realized in the early part of this century that this ability to see what the next big thing is could in fact become a career.
Okay. Now, I think Craig has probably a question to follow up from that.
Well, first of all, I read the first two books. I did not get to the third book. But in your second book, you list several periods of massive change.
Right.
And I guess my question for you would be, who is to say that one or more of those times were not as disruptive, especially for those people living in them? I look at that period of time that you listed any number of things between 1875 and 1925, and it had been positively cataclysmic for those people, yes?
Right. Well, the three things I listed in the book was 1450 to 1525, movable type press, end of the Italian Renaissance, 1775 to 1825, invention of capitalism, democracy, the industrial age, and what you said, 1875, 1925, everything that we live in, right?
Yeah.
The difference is twofold. One, those were either 75 or 50-year time frames.
Yes.
At that point in time, the average lifespan was like 40 years.
Yeah.
So if somebody was alive when the movable type press was invented in 1450 in Germany, probably somebody didn't have access to the consequences of that for 50 or 75 years somewhere else in the world. Same thing if 1875 to 1925. Maybe if you were a young child in 1880 and you lived to be in the 1920s, you could look back at your life and say a whole lot of change. So the point is that all three of those, the amount of change was experienced over multiple generations. Today, with fiber optics, speed of information 187,000 miles an hour, right? We know what happened in China last hour, right? So the difference is the longevity of the period. I think there'll be as much change in the 2020s as any half of one of those times. So there'll be 20 or 30 years of change, and we're all going to experience it together. So that's the profound difference, the generational length and the lack of connectivity. I mean, think about that. 1775 to 1825, the speed of information was a horse day. Yeah. How far a horse could go in a day. Right. So that's the difference.
You called the 2020s the most disruptive.
Yes.
What are the events leading up to that has us where we're at today?
Yeah, so I started realizing this about 2016, 2017, that most of the dynamics, the macro trends and the forces were going to converge in this decade. So then I started really starting to look into that. And if you just think about, so we're sitting here in late July, so we are 25% of the way through the 2020s, 30 months, right? And think is what's happened in 30 months. You know, a global pandemic that's still ongoing, a fast recession, a fast recovery, a bear market, a bull market, a land war in Europe, to total disassemblage and beginning reorganization of the workplace, and I could go and storming of the Capitol by the citizens that has never happened before. So you just look at everything and it's just like, I guess I'm right? I mean, the amount of change that we have gone through in the last 2.5 years rivals almost any other decade of our lifetime.
Coming up, we take a look at the 2020s as a whole, and David gives us his point of view on the big dynamics of the decade. So please stay tuned. We are only 2+ years into the 2020s, and already it's been an extremely turbulent decade. And we're going to get into that a little bit here in a moment, David, but I want to tell our viewers, I want you to tell our viewers what your local and international affiliations are. Give them a little bit of background about who you are and what you've done in the past.
Well, sure. I mean, that's why I'm here on the home court, right?
Yep.
Because I'm a resident of Sarasota. And for the last 11 years, I've been the futurist in residence at the Ringling College of Art and Design, working directly for Dr. Larry Thompson, the president. And prior to COVID, I pretty much traveled the world giving speeches about the future, all 6 inhabited continents, 16 countries. And that led me to become the honorary futurist of the Future Business School of China.
Wow.
And then locally, so that's the only international affiliation. I've spoken all around the world. Okay. And then I helped launch with Dr. Philip Kotler, the father of modern marketing, the Sarasota Institute, a 21st century think tank that didn't make it through COVID in terms of in person, but it's still online. And I write a twice-a-month column for the Sarasota Herald Tribune, which I love. And it gets me to be able to take the global dynamics that I speak about and write about and make them particular to the Gulf Coast.
And our viewers can go online and find that if they go to the Herald Tribune.
Yes, just go to the Herald Tribune. They have a firewall, but if you're a subscriber, just go into the search bar and type in The Futurist and you'll get all my columns.
Okay, so now the big question. What are the overwhelming dynamics do you foresee for the 2020s, David?
Well, the big 4 of the 2020s are the age of intelligence, artificial intelligence, neuroscience, the climate crisis, the reinvention of capitalism and democracy, and towards the end of the decade, a new emerging global consciousness. So those are the 4.
Following up on that, again, going back to your book, you get a little dark in chapter 9 of your second book. You say, and I'll quote you, in this decade, we will have a clear choice, a conscious choice toward the future we want, or a mostly unconscious choice toward a disastrous future. Give us the highlights, if you would, on our to-do list here.
Yeah, no. That's the, that's.
I mean, that really hit me.
People. The interesting thing is, people have said, "Gee, you're so apocalyptic," and I'm so optimistic. Right? I looked up the root of apocalyptic. It's apocalypsis from ancient Greek, which means the revelation or to reveal or the lifting of the veil. So I choose to be apocalyptic because what I'm saying is reality is about to change.
Yes.
It's not apocalypse. Life isn't going to end. Life as we know it. So the way to think about the 2020s is that it is the last decade was kind of the beginning of the first century of 21st century thought. In other words, we all kind of live in the legacy thinking of the 20th century. So the 2020s is the time when the reality of what was is giving away to what will be. And yet the what will be isn't really clear to people, which is why there's all this angst and upset about all the change and everything going on in America, because there's no clear path. That's what my function is. And to your question, I reached for this book. This is the book 3. So to the answer to, R. Buckminster Fuller, one of the great thinkers of all time, systems thinker, we quote him a lot in this book, quote, "Whether it is to be utopia or oblivion, it will be a touch-and-go relay race right up to the final moment. Humanity is in a final exam as to whether or not it qualifies for continuance in the universe." That's what we're talking about with climate change, for sure.
Well, and one of the things that I felt, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, is because I don't think I'm the only other person that has felt change is happening, and they're so minuscule, but when you start adding them all up together, like you said, going forward, we have to make changes, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But that brings us to your point. There's a fork in the road.
Yes,
we're at that fork in the road. There's
right.
a shift in the age, is what you call it. What's that about?
So again, it's Fuller. I'll use climate change as the metaphor, the climate crisis, really, climate catastrophe. We are hurtling down one road, which is going to lead to Armageddon, literally, the end of civilization by 2100 globally. Or, and we're at the fork in the road, we can go down the road of the future we want to choose to have and to choose to live. We can create the future that we want. Actually, we're in the detour. We've already gone down. We have to detour to get back on that road. And
what caused the detour?
What caused the detour hasn't happened yet. In other words, it will have to be a detour because we are hurtling down the superhighway to destruction. So we need to detour back to a road that we want. So my mission in life is to motivate people to think about the collective future we want to have. Hashtag humanity first. Right? So and I want your viewers, how weird has the last 2.5 years been? That's right, the decade of cognitive dissonance. The dissonance between what I thought was reality and what this reality is, and where are we going with it? That's the fork in the road, to kind of get that, catalyze that type of thinking into, we can choose this path, but we don't have much time. That's the fork in the road. By the 2030, we'll be stuck.
Are you saying that, and you call it legacy thinking, are you saying that that's one of the things that is kind of stopping us in our tracks right now?
Absolutely, absolutely. In other words, if you think about any category, like communications, shopping, entertainment, and you go back 15 years, it's entirely different than it is today. So we've adapted to that. It's easy to adapt to a new form of TV and a new smartphone, but it's not easy to adapt to a new workplace where you work from home. It's not easy to adapt to a environment where we have to get off of internal combustion engine cars and into EVs. So we're at this moment, this nexus where what was is fading away and what will be is yet to become totally clear.
Up next on Suncoast FYI, we discuss the future and humanity's path forward beyond the 2020s. So don't go anywhere. In our final segment of the episode, we take a look at the future for America and the world at large. So, David,
Yes.
everything seems to be, for lack of a better term, falling apart in America.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to our viewers as your final thoughts to me? I know Craig's going to ask you a follow-up on this, but the best way to handle the future, look at the future.
So, two-part answer. First of all, that is why it's the most disruptive decade, because as I said in the prior segment, what was is falling away, and what will be is yet to be fully clear, made clear. So in this tier, everything seems to be upset and changed. So it's actually people paying attention to the now.
Yes.
I always say that the future starts in the now. That's how I look to see where it's going, right? But most people don't pay attention to the now. They get up this morning thinking today's going to be just like yesterday, so
Yep.
they're living in the past.
Exactly.
So now all of a sudden, I don't go to the office. I can't buy this. I can't get that.
Yeah.
I can't go to the movie theaters. I can't go. What's happening? So it's forcing people to be in the present, and it's the moment of creation, really.
And that is the place to be.
Yes.
Live in the moment, live in the present, not in the past, because we can't change that. So we've got to live.
I say to people, your grandchildren are going to ask you what it was like to live in the 2020s. Just like, what was it like to live in the Great Depression or
50s,
World War II
right.
or the 50s, right? It's that it's significant.
So this is why.
This is why I write these books. I wrote one book, which is basically here's how to solve the climate crisis. This is the book about it, where I talk about how to lower carbon emissions. I wrote it in 2019, year by year by year in the 2030s, and how to do it, the United States and the world. So this is the guidebook. And then this book, these are obviously a series of books on the 2020s.
Right.
The reason there's a series of books is I realized through writing now 13 books, people like short books they can read quickly. So the single greatest comment, it's a great book and I could read it in half a day.
Yep.
But also people have different interests. So I'm going to write a book about reinvention of capitalism and democracy, design, what people are feeling, cognitive dissonance.
These books people can get online or
You
your
can get them
website?
online. You just go to Amazon, type in David Houle books, and I've got an author's page.
Okay.
Yeah, or you can get them at the Ringling store, right?
Right.
Which you run,
yeah.
right?
Yes, at the Made by Gallery.
Yeah.
So we do have those. Craig,
Yeah.
quickly.
Give me the timeline on this.
Sure.
When did you write the first book in this series?
In this series, the 2020s, that came out in March of 2020. The cognitive dissonance came out in a year later, in March of 2021, and then this just came out at the end of last year.
So my question is, you're writing these through collectively some of the most turbulent times
Right.
anyone has experienced. And up until now on this show, we've been talking about some pretty heavy stuff.
Right.
It's time now, as I say in the newsroom, you got to give us hope.
Sure.
I tell the reporters it was a bad story, but give us some hope at the end of that story, please. You got the floor for about 2.5 minutes.
The hope is we have the opportunity to undo a lot of the stuff that was done in the 20th century and reinvent it for the 21st century. But in order to do that, it's heavy lifting. And that's my only concern. I mean, my mission in life at this age is to get out there and to tell people that we can have what we want, but there's a true sense of urgency every day. So the opportunity is great. You got a blank canvas. It's the most exciting and most dangerous time of being an artist, right? You get to fill it, but how do I fill it? Or you're sitting down, you're writing a whole new song, and you got empty sheet music. What are the notes? So that's a really scary time. That's the time we're at. We're at the moment of creation of what we want to live in the 21st century. It's up to us. What you see all around is the collapse of hierarchical authority, right? I mean, just look at politics in the United States. Look at politics around the world. What you have, capitalism and democracy were invented in the 1700s. Adam Smith died in 1792. The philosophical architect of capitalism didn't even see the industrial age. So all of this stuff, it's kind of a mindset that this is the reality we've lived. Well, we're going to slam into the extinction wall if we don't. We have no choice but to change. That's why the fork in the road. Don't you want to go down the nice road?
Yeah.
Rather than the bad road? Well, we got to do some work to do that, right? And we have to change how we think about things. And if you look at, a way to leave it is COVID. I said that COVID is like a bike with training wheels for the 2020s. As a parent or as a child, bike with training wheels means what? You learn how to pedal, you learn how to brake, and you learn hand signals, and then the training wheels go away and you learn balance. And as we know, being adults, if you haven't skied, I haven't skied in 10 years. It's just like riding a bike, right? So the metaphor is we've all learned the balance. We've gotten through COVID. Just think of that as the silver lining of COVID, because we've had to become adaptable and resilient in ways we never had to be. That's how we get through the 2020s. So we've been, the ironic gift of COVID is that it has accelerated 5 years of change into 1 year of change, which is what the whole decade is doing. So we've experienced this. So I'm optimistic.
Thank you so much for being
Boy,
here.
we could do
I
another
wish
show.
I know.
Absolutely.
Wish we had a couple more hours. Thank you, David.
Great questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on Suncoast FYI. Each week, the SNN team tries to bring stories and information to you about our community, and we hope that you've enjoyed it. If you would like to promote your nonprofit or you know of an upcoming community event that you would like to see, all you need to do is call our producer, Adam Huntley, at 941-361-4645. or email fyi@snntv.com. And this is a complimentary service. To view previous episodes, go to snntv.com and click on the What's On tab. I'm Nancy O'Neill, and we'll see you next Friday on Suncoast FYI.